Good morning and welcome to story time. And we're back outside because it's a beautiful day this morning. All the reading logs for July have been collected. Prizes have been drawn, so congratulations to all of those who won a prize and got a participation prize just for reading. Keep reading. The August logs are posted online and the August take and make bags are available. So if you haven't got one of those yet, grab one from the library next time you go to pick up books, or give us a call and schedule a pickup. We do have browsing appointments available now, so if you just want to come in and pick out your own books, you definitely can call us and make a browsing appointment and come in and spend 15 minutes and pick out your own books. Today's theme is going to be when I grow up. So have you ever thought about what you want to be when you grow up to be an adult? Do you want to be a doctor or a nurse or a teacher maybe? Can you guess where I'm at today? Many of you probably know where I'm at. Teachers work here. Also, you could be a librarian, or maybe you want to do something really out there that you've never even heard of before. Maybe a unicorn tamer. Who knows? It could be anything you want. The first book we're going to read is When I Grow Up by Joas Kittinger. When I grow up, I can be anything I want to be. A doctor, a farmer, an artist, a truck driver, a singer, a teacher, a clown, a firefighter. I could even be president. But today, I just want to play. And this story is also called When I Grow Up, but it is by Mercer Mayer. When I grow up, I'll be a great dancer. I'll dance in the ballet. But first I'll lead a long parade through town. Then I will join the circus. I'll walk the tightrope and everyone will cheer. Or I might just be the funniest clown in the world. I will also teach lions and tigers to dance and play music. When I get tired of being a circus star, I'll be a mountain climber. Then I will be a truck driver. I will drive hundreds of miles every day. I will have a pet store too. All of my pets will be my friends, and I will never sell any of them. Not for sale. Just for fun, I will be a world-famous doctor and make everybody feel better. I will be a fire chief and will rescue anyone who needs rescuing. I will be a police officer and help everybody cross the street. In my spare time, I will be a race car driver. I will win every race. If I get bored with that, I will be a mail carrier and deliver letters everywhere. Woo! For you. On the weekends, I will fly an airplane. I will do dangerous tricks in the air. If I fall, I will just open my parachute and float gently to the ground. I will also be a very famous baker. I will make cakes and cookies. No one will ever have to eat liver or beans again. Say, that reminds me, I'm getting hungry. What's for dinner, I ask. Liver and beans, Mom answers. I can't wait until I grow up. So you can be more than one thing if you want to when you grow up. You don't have to just pick one thing to do when you grow up. And the next book is called Career Day by Ann Rockwell. When special visitors come to our school, they tell us about the work they do. Then we tell them about the work we do. Today it is my turn to introduce my visitor. What if I forget what I'm supposed to say? Sometimes that happens. Not just to me, Mrs. Madoff says, but to everyone. Here he is, right on time. This is my dad, I say. He drives a big bulldozer. He's helping to build our new library. Good morning, Mr. Lopez, everyone says. Good morning, boys and girls, my dad says. Next we meet Charlie's visitor. His mother is a judge who works in a courtroom and wears a long black robe. If there's too much noise, she pounds her gavel and says, "Order in the court!" Then everyone has to be quiet. When Kate introduces her visitor, she says, "My dad plays bass in an orchestra at night. He practices all day and takes care of my baby brother while our mother goes to work at the bank." Michko's mother writes books for us to read. She draws the pictures in them too. She's very good at drawing mice. Mrs. Madoff's visitor is her husband. He's a scientist called a paleontologist. He just got back from South America, where he was digging for dinosaur bones. The bones tell us about dinosaurs that lived long ago. Sarah's visitor is our crossing guard. She brings Sarah to school every day because she is also Sarah's grandmother. That's why Sarah is always the first one at school and the last one to go home in the afternoon. Evelyn's mother is a nurse at the hospital. She takes care of all the newborn babies in our town. She tells us those babies are very, very cute, but they sure do cry a lot when they are hungry. Jessica's mother takes care of animals. She's a veterinarian, the kind of doctor who makes sick animals better. Sam's visitor drives the sanitation truck that carries our garbage to the big town dump. Kate and Evelyn and I wave to him just as we always do whenever he comes down our street. "Hey kids, remember to recycle," Sam's father says. Evan's father wears a leather apron that holds the tools he uses all the time. He shows us how to hammer a nail. When it's time for Nicholas to introduce his visitor, he says, "I bet you've all bought groceries at the Friendly Farm Market. Guess what? My father is the manager of the store." Today it's Mr. Sisko's turn to introduce his special visitor. He says, "Good morning, everyone. I'd like you to meet Professor Elkhorn. He's my teacher at college." Hey, I never knew grown-ups had teachers too. Grown-ups sure have interesting work to do, and so do we. I wonder what I'll be when I grow up. And here is another one titled "When I Grow Up" by Yal Yankovic. I waited so long for the hours to pass, but soon it was noon, and there in Mrs. Crump's class. And Thursday at noon, I'm sure you know well, is the time of the week when we do show and tell. And this week, the subject, so special to me, was when I grow up, what I'm going to be. That's something I'd really been thinking about, and I just couldn't wait to get all those thoughts out. So when Mrs. Crump said, "Who's ready to share?" you can guess who was there with his hand in the air. I raised both my hands just as high as they go and bounced up and down, and then, what do you know? Well, Mrs. Crump picked me. Yes, me to go first. Oh, I was so happy I thought I would burst. I proudly stood up and began my oration concerning my voice for a future vocation. Ahem. Esteemed friends and colleagues and dear Mrs. Crump, I know what I'm going to be when I grow up. Why, I'll be the greatest chef you've ever seen. The world will go crazy for my hot cuisine. I'll tantalize taste buds with my rigatoni, sautéed with black truffles and pickled bologna, surrounded by kumquats and candied pig's feet, topped with shrimp-flavored lollipops. Bon appetit! My walls will be filled with awards that I've gotten for toast on a stick and my Twinkies au gratin. My kitchen will be the most famous in France, so make reservations 12 years in advance. There's no doubt about it. I'm certain you'll see a world-renowned chef is what I'm going to be. That's very nice, Billy, said Mrs. Crump. Who wants to be next? Maybe Susie or Fred? I said, hold the phone now, I haven't departed. Hang on to your seats, 'cause I'm just getting started. See, maybe instead I could be a snail trainer. Man, that would be awesome. Why, that's a no-brainer. I'll teach all my snails to do really neat tricks. They'll play dead, roll over, and even fetch sticks. Of course, all the sticks will come back 2 years later. But working with snails, I mean, what could be greater? They'll do any stunt that I like. Holy moly, I'll train them to pedal a bike really slowly. Then ooze through a huge ring of fire and crawl at a snail's pace across a high wire. Then finish by writing my name with their trails. That's right, I'll be Billy, master of snails. Or else maybe I'll be the lathe operator who makes the hydraulic torque wrench calibrator, which fine-tunes the wrench that's specifically made to retighten the nuts on the lateral blade that's directly beneath the main radial sockets inside cooling systems on X-14 rockets. And since this profession is as cool as can be, well, who better to do it than me? So here's an idea, perhaps just for laughs. I might make my living by milking giraffes. It's oh so cliche to get milk from a cow. I bet all those cows need a break anyhow. Imagine me milking way up in the air. I'd use a tall ladder instead of a chair. What? Milking giraffes? Said Mrs. Crump. Oh, please. I countered. How else could we make giraffe cheese? Now don't interrupt me. I'm not really through yet. There's still lots of stuff I'm planning to do yet. 'Cause maybe I'll be a gorilla masseuse. Or an artist who sculpts out of chocolate mousse. Or a rodeo clown, or a movie director, or maybe a professional pickle inspector, or a big sumo wrestler, or a hedge fund investor, or a smelly pit-sniffing deodorant tester. Or I'll be an expert on nuclear fission, or else a foot model, or a friendly mortician, or a waiter, or a skater, or a master debater, or a dinosaur dusting museum curator, or a TV repairman, a sidewalk sign waver, or part-time assistant tarantula shaver. And that's about when Mrs. Crump said, "Now, Billy, please make up your mind. This is getting quite silly. Which of those things are you going to choose?" I shuffled around. I looked at my shoes. I finally said, "My great-grandfather's Bob has been a whole lot of things and a whole bunch of jobs. A butcher, a barber, a bellman, a bouncer, a telephone psychic, a bingo announcer. You know what? He just turned 103, and he's still not quite sure what he wants to be. See, I I'm only 8 now, so frankly I'm hoping you'll cut me some slack if I leave my options open. Let's just wait and find out what my future brings. Hey, I might have time to do all of these things. And then the bell rang and we all went to lunch, and I was sipping my pineapple punch. I pondered professions I'd like to enter, like brave firefighter or a crazy inventor. Or maybe, just maybe now, when I grow up, I could be a great teacher like dear Mrs. Crump. And this one, I'm not going to read the whole thing because there are hundreds of mixes and matches in this book. So this one would be one you would want to check out. But it is called When I Grow Up, Mix and Match. And it's a board book. But it starts off with, I like to be an adventurous scuba diver who takes pictures of fish and swims around in the coral. But then you can switch the pages and it changes the words. So you could be, maybe I'll be a brave fireman who takes pictures of fish and swims around coral. And you can switch each part of the person out and get a new story and a new career. So this is one that I will just show you and then you can check it out at our library. But there are lots of options here for stories and pictures. And it ends with, I could be a daring astronaut who repairs the satellite and floats in space. And this one is called Everybody Works by Shelley Rotner and Ken Kreisler. And at our library in Hutchinson, we are putting big red e-stickers. I don't know if you can see this, but it's a big red sticker with a white E on it. And that means it's an easier to read book. So that way you can find them in the non-fiction shelves and then you can know, I could read that all by myself. Everybody works in different ways. Work is caring and protecting. Work is delivering and selling. Work is creating. And building and fixing. Some people make things. Some people grow things or cook the food we eat. Some people work in an office. Some work at home. Others work outside. Or travel from place to place. Some work to earn money or volunteer because they are needed. Sometimes work is just a hobby, just for fun. Children work too. Even animals work. Everybody works. What about you? What do you do that's work? Maybe it's working really hard at school, or reading books, or maybe you have to make your bed in the morning and keep your room clean. And our last story for story time today is Curious George Takes a Job. This is George. He lived in the zoo. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. He wanted to find out what was going on outside the zoo. One day, when the zookeeper was not paying attention, George got a hold of the keys for the cage. When the keeper discovered what had happened, it was too late. George was gone. was George! They looked for him everywhere, but they could not find him. George was hiding in the hay of his friend, the elephant. Finally, the keepers gave up looking for him. George found a nice, cozy spot to sleep under the elephant's right ear, and the next morning, before the zoo opened, he got away safely. Once in the street, George felt a little scared. What should he do in the big city? Maybe he could find his friend, the man with the yellow hat, who had brought him over from Africa a long time ago. Only George did not know where he lived. There was a bus stopping at the corner. George had never ridden on one. Quickly, he climbed the lamppost, jumped on top of the bus, and off they went. Now they were right in the center of town. There was so much to see that George did not know where to look first. If only he could go on riding like this forever. But after a while, George got tired and a little dizzy. When the bus slowed down to turn into a side street, George jumped off. There was a restaurant right in front of him. Something smelled good. Suddenly, George felt very hungry. The kitchen door stood open, and George walked in. On the table, there was a big pot. Of course, George was curious. He had to find out what was in it. When the cook came back, he had a big surprise. Spaghetti was all over the place, and in the middle of it, a little monkey. George had been eating yards and yards, and had wound himself all up in it. The cook was a kind man and did not scold much, but George had to clean up the kitchen and do all the dishes. My, what a lot of them there were! The cook was watching George. "You are lucky to have 4 hands," he said. "You can do things quite twice as quickly." "I have a friend who could use a handy little fellow like you to wash windows. If you'd like to, I will take you over to him." So they went down into the subway and took an uptown train to the cook's friend, who was an elevator man in a skyscraper. "Sure, I could use you," the elevator man said to George. "I will give you what you need for the job. You could start right away. But remember, you are here for washing windows. Never mind what people inside the house are doing. Don't be curious, or you'll get into trouble." George promised to be a good, but little monkeys sometimes forget. George was ready to start. My, how many windows there were! But George got ahead quickly, since he worked with all 4 hands. He jumped from window to window, just as he had once jumped from tree to tree in the African jungle. For a while, George stuck to his work and did not pay any attention to the people inside. Of course, he was curious, but he remembered his promise. In one room, a little boy was crying because he did not want to eat his spinach. George did not even look, but went right on with his work. In another room, a man was taking a nap and snoring. George was sorry it was not his friend, the man with the yellow hat. He listened to the funny noise for a while and then went on working. But what was going on in here? George stopped working and pressed his nose against the window. 2 painters were working inside. George was fascinated. Painting looked like a lot more fun than washing windows. The painters were getting ready to go out for lunch. The minute they left, George climbed inside. What wonderful paints and brushes they had! George could not resist. An hour later, the painters came back. They opened the door and stood there with their mouths wide open. The whole room changed into a jungle with palm trees all over the walls, and a giraffe and 2 leopards and a zebra. And a little monkey was busy painting himself on one of the trees. Then the painters knew what had happened. Luckily, George was close to a door. He ran out as fast as he could. After him ran 2 painters, then the elevator man, and then the woman who lived in the place. "Oh, my lovely room, cried the woman. "Don't let him get away." George headed for the fire escape. George reached the end of the fire escape. The others had not caught up with him yet. Here was his chance. They could not jump, but George could easily jump down and escape. In a moment, he would be safe. Poor little George, he had forgotten that pavement was hard as stone, not like the soft grass of the jungle. Too bad. The fall had broken his leg and an ambulance came to take George to the hospital. He got what he deserved, said the woman, making my apartment into a jungle indeed. I told him he would get into trouble, the elevator man added. He was too curious. George had to lie in bed with his leg high up in a plaster cast. He was very unhappy. And it had all started out so nicely. If only he had not been so curious, he could have had a lot of fun. Now it was too late. But the next morning, George's friend, the man with the yellow hat, was buying his newspaper. Suddenly he got very excited. "This is George!" he shouted when he saw the picture on the front page. Quickly he read the whole story and then ran to a telephone booth to ring the hospital. "I am George's friend," he said to the nurse who answered the telephone. "Please take care of him so that he will get better quickly. I want to take him to a movie studio and make a picture about his life in the jungle. Don't let him get into any more mischief until I can take him away." Finally, the day came when George could walk again. "Your friend is going to take you away this morning," said the nurse. "Just wait right here for him and don't touch anything." As soon as George was alone, he looked around at all the strange hospital things. "I wonder what is in the big blue bottle," he thought. George was very curious. It smelled funny. Suddenly his head began to turn. He felt as if he were flying. Then rings and stars danced before his eyes and everything went dark. And this is how the man with the yellow hat found George when he came to call for him. They picked him up and shook him, but they could not wake him up. He was so fast asleep they finally had to put him under the shower. How surprised he was when he woke up. George said goodbye to the nurse and the kind doctor. In the president's office, George had to sign a contract. Now he was a movie actor. In the studio, George was kept so busy all the time that he forgot to be curious. He liked the jungle they made for him and played happily there. And when the picture was finally finished, George invited all his friends to see it. The doctor and the nurse, the ambulance driver and the man from the newsstand, and the woman and the elevator man and the two painters and the cook and the reporter and all the keepers at the zoo. Now the lights went out and the picture started. "This is George," the voice began. "He lived in a jungle. He was a good little monkey. He had only one fault. He was too curious." The end. So George had quite the adventure. Well, thank you for joining us for Stories in the Park. We only have a couple weeks left of summer reading, so get those reading logs filled out and get them turned in by August 22nd to be entered into the last prize drawing for the summer. Bye!